Let's dive even deeper into the atmosphere of the 1970s, when the world of communication was completely different. Analog, tactile, filled with sounds, smells, and special rituals that our digital world today lacks. The time before the advent of the internet, email, and of course social media seems almost like a different era where human connections were built according to different laws. In the 70s, every interaction, whether it was a phone call, a letter, or a personal visit, was more weighty, required effort and patience, but in return it gave a sense of genuine connection, anticipation, and expectation. News did not spread instantly around the world. It was filtered, passed from mouth to mouth, through the rustle of newspaper pages, through the handshake of a meeting. People lived in real, physical space, and their social ties were built slowly, layer by layer, but this only made them stronger and more solid. It was a special, unhurried rhythm of communication that is worth remembering and feeling. Let us revive these moments, which for many people today may seem almost exotic. Phone calls from home. Almost every American home in the 1970s had a telephone, usually a heavy device made of bakelite or sturdy plastic, often in bright, garish colors, orange, yellow, green, turquoise, or classic black or beige. It was tied to the wall or stood on a special table in the hallway, kitchen, or living room, with a long, twisted cord that was always tangled, stretched, and could reach the next room, allowing a little privacy from the eyes but not from the ears of the household. The phone rang with a loud, shrill crackle, ring, ring, and could be heard throughout the house, causing everyone to freeze in anticipation. Who is it? You had to be able to pick up the phone before it went dead after a few beeps because there were no answering machines yet, and a missed call meant a missed opportunity to communicate. You had to drop the line, wait for a dial tone, and redial, which was quite tedious. Many people kept lists of frequently used numbers on scrap pieces of paper taped next to the phone, or wrote them down in small notebooks that were always next to the machine. A separate telephone directory, a thick book divided into white pages with names, addresses, and phone numbers of individuals, often alphabetized by last name and street, and yellow pages with companies and services sorted by category was a must-have in every home, often on a separate shelf under the telephone. The telephone became the center of home communication and part of everyday rituals. Conversations often lasted for hours, especially among teenagers, who after school exchanged news, gossip, discussed school events, music, and likes. Privacy for private conversations was difficult, as the telephone was often in a public place and all the household could unwittingly hear part of the conversation. My parents grumbled that the line was busy, and sometimes I had to negotiate a time when it was okay to use the phone, especially in the evening, when there were preferential rates for long-distance calls. The feeling of a heavy handset in your hand pressed to your ear, the sound of your interlocutor's voice coming out of the speaker, the clicks when dialing a number, waiting for a dial tone before connecting, or the annoying busy signal, all of this was an integral part of telephone communication in the 70s. It was a direct communication channel that demanded attention and did not allow for multitasking. Letter writing. Writing a letter was an art and ritual that required time, thoughtfulness, patience, and a certain spirit. People chose paper, plain, ruled paper for everyday letters to friends, or beautiful paper with monograms, watermarks, or embossing for special occasions or correspondence with close relatives. They wrote with a pen, ballpoint or fountain pen, with a characteristic squeak of the pen on the paper, carefully choosing words, trying to convey on the paper not only information, but also their emotions, intonations, mood, which could change from sentence to sentence. Accurate and sometimes very individual handwriting filled in the lines, creating a unique artifact. Then they folded the letter in a certain way, placed it in an envelope, and filled in the address on the envelope in neat handwriting. Name, street, city, state, zip code, which was just becoming widely used. The letters were often accompanied by photographs taken with a film camera, often black and white or with the characteristic color rendition of the 70s. Yellowish faded, clippings from the newspapers or magazines that might be of interest to the addressee, small souvenirs, drawings of children, or even dried flowers. The envelope was sealed, a stamp was affixed and taken to the post office or dropped into a blue mailbox on the street with a distinctive clap. And then the waiting began. Waiting for a reply could take days, a week, or even 2 weeks or more if you were corresponding with someone from another city or state. Checking the mailbox every day became a small ritual, full of hope and anticipation. Receiving a letter was a real event, a source of excitement, joy, or even sadness, depending on the content. To see the familiar handwriting on the envelope in your mailbox, to feel the density of the paper, to smell it was like receiving a small, very personal gift filled with the thoughts and time of the sender. Ordinary letter carriers on their routes became unwitting witnesses to thousands of little human stories unfolding on the pages of the letters they delivered. The letter itself was considered not just a message, but a gesture of attention, care, respect, and love for the addressee. Old letters were carefully kept, tied with ribbons, in boxes or caskets, becoming family heirlooms that could be reread years later, going back in time. Postcards. Postcards were a short but very warm, colorful, and affordable way to remind yourself when you didn't have time or the need to write a full-fledged letter. When sending a postcard from a trip, vacation, out of town, or just for a holiday, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, birthday, people chose images with the most beautiful views of the city, landscapes, famous landmarks, funny pictures, or reproductions of paintings. On the back, next to the space for the address and stamp, only a couple of lines were left. A brief greeting, a few words about the place of stay, a wish or a greeting. Greetings from California. It's sunny here, eating oranges. Thinking of you, love Mary and John. It was enough to send a message and show that you remembered the person. But for the recipient, it was an important sign. You are remembered, thought of, even from a distance. A bright picture and a few warm words could lift the mood for the whole day. Collecting postcards became a hobby for many people, especially if they were sent from different parts of the country or the world, with unusual views or rare stamps. They were carefully stored in special albums with transparent pockets, glued in diaries, or simply attached to the refrigerator with magnets. Bright pictures that reminded of people, places, and experienced moments. Postcards were a simple, accessible, and visually pleasing way to keep in touch and share impressions, requiring little effort but carrying the warmth of human attention. Personal visits. In the 1970s, the concept of dropping in unannounced, dropping by, was a perfectly normal and widespread practice, especially within the same neighborhood or city. There was no need to email in advance, coordinate a time a week in advance on messengers, or call to make sure the person was home and available. People simply knocked on the door, knock, knock, or even went inside if they knew the owners were home, e.g., saw a car in the driveway, lights in the windows in the evening, or heard voices inside. The phrase, "come on in," after opening the door was a common greeting. Neighbors would often drop in on each other just to chat, borrow a glass of sugar, ask advice about the garden, or just to make sure everything was okay. These visits brought people in neighborhoods closer together, creating strong neighborhood communities where everyone knew each other and could be counted on to help. Socializing was a natural, relaxed part of daily life, based on physical proximity and a willingness to give of one's time. It was in these unhurried conversations in the kitchen, sitting on the porch, or just standing at the front door, that real intimacy, understanding, and strong friendships were born, based on real presence and shared time spent together without hurry or formality. Street talk, a neighborhood stroll, or even just going outside to do something, often turned into a string of short or not-so-short conversations with neighbors. In the 70s, people spent more time outside doing chores, tending to their lots, or just relaxing on the porch or in the yard. Neighbors went out to mow the lawn, work in the garden, wash the car in the driveway, and children played on lawns and sidewalks. It was natural to stop, say hello, say a few words about the weather, local news, children, pets, or the latest sporting events when passing familiar faces. Street socializing helped to stay informed about events in one's neighborhood, exchange useful information, where the discounts are at the local store, who is sick, who has had an accident, get recommendations, or simply share the everyday little things that make life richer without having to read newspapers or watch the news on TV. It was an organic, natural way to build and maintain connections based on physical proximity and everyday intersections in the shared space of the neighborhood. House porches and front yards became mini social spaces of sorts. Phone booths. Public telephones were everywhere, on busy streets in city centers, at the entrances to stores, cafes, bus and train stations, airports, parks, hospitals. They were characteristic glass or metal booths, often with a hinged door that did not always close tightly, illuminated by a dim light bulb inside that sometimes flickered or did not light at all. To make a call, one had to carry change, dimes or quarters, which were dropped into the coin slot with a distinctive jingling sound. Often a certain number of coins were required to make a connection, and for long-distance calls you had to drop them in batches as the machine asked, "Please deposit more coins." It was not uncommon to have to wait in line, especially in crowded places or during rush hour. Cigarette butts, wrappers, and used coins were often lying on the floor of the booth, and the phone itself could be sticky or dirty. But for many, the phone booth was a real lifesaver in emergencies, when you needed to urgently contact home or friends when you were out of it. Sometimes you could see people emotionally discussing important news, confessing their love over the phone, arguing, reporting something urgent, or just having a long conversation with their hand over their ear against the street noise. The booths became islands of communication and privacy in the midst of the city bustle, witnesses of thousands of short, but often very personal and important moments. They have preserved for many people stories of joy, sadness, unexpected decisions, changes of plans and life turns. In cold or rainy weather, the box could be a temporary shelter from the weather. On a hot day, it was stuffy inside and often smelled of stale cigarette smoke, if someone smoked inside despite the prohibitions, or just the street and dust. But they were an integral part of the cityscape, a symbol of affordable communication and a place where you could quickly connect to the world if you had the right coins. Passing notes in school. When the teacher was at the blackboard, passionately explaining history or algebra, and you couldn't wait until recess to talk to a friend about last night's episode of your favorite show or the new album from a band, notes came to the rescue. Short messages on paper, often torn from a notebook or notebook, were a way to have a secret, parallel dialogue right during class. The notes were written in hurried, sometimes illegible handwriting, often using abbreviations, emoticons, simple colon, and parenthesis. Personal codes or even drawings that only the sender and the recipient could understand. They were folded into a tiny square, triangle, tube, or complex origami and passed secretly from hand to hand, along rows between desks, or even across several desks through the air, at the risk of being intercepted. It was a high-risk game with an element of espionage. You had to act quickly, stealthily, and make sure the teacher was not looking in your direction. If the teacher noticed this process or caught the note in flight, it was confiscated, and in the worst case, especially if the content was personal or inappropriate, the teacher could read it aloud in front of the whole class, which was a source of incredible embarrassment, shame, and a desire to fall through the cracks. The notes were used to write declarations of affection or love. Do you like me? Circle yes or no. Share the latest gossip and rumors, arrange to meet after school. Discuss answers to a test paper. Complain about a boring lesson, or simply exchange jokes. Sometimes a whole chain of students was involved in delivering one small piece of paper, which required coherence, trust, and secrecy. Each member of the chain carried the risk of being caught. Such moments filled the school days with a special excitement, a sense of adventure, of belonging to a secret community, and a slight rebellion against the rules. Notes became an integral part of the school communication culture of the 70s and 80s, a symbol of secret liaisons, undercover communication, and the value of a personal message that had to be extracted and preserved. Family gatherings. On weekends or holidays such as Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, or just to celebrate the birthday of someone in the family, families often gathered together. Distant and close relatives would move into one house, usually the largest or most hospitable. Children, parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, cousins and cousins. All generations gathered under one roof, often at one large table, which sometimes had to be extended with special inserts or made up of several to accommodate everyone. Such gatherings were accompanied by an abundance of homemade food, traditional family dishes that had been passed down from generation to generation, pies, casseroles, salads, meat dishes. The aromas of fresh baked goods, roasted meat, and hot coffee were in the air, mingling with the smell of the old house and perfume. Around the table, people didn't just eat, they shared news from their lives. Who got married, who got divorced, who went to college, who found a new job, who moved to another state, who was sick and who recovered. We discussed future plans, reminisced about the past, argued about politics, sports, shared cooking recipes, laughed at old jokes, and cried together over family losses. The children played separately, often running around the house or in the yard, but occasionally they were drawn into general conversations or asked to talk about their school successes or new hobbies. The stories of the older generation about their youth, about how their parents lived, about important family events and hardships, were passed on by word of mouth, becoming part of the family's collective memory and identity. These stories, told to the clatter of forks on plates and the hum of voices, shaped the younger generation's perception of their roots. Such gatherings strengthened kinship ties, helped maintain a sense of belonging to a larger family, and passed on traditions and values from generation to generation. Discussions around the table could be lively, sometimes even boisterous and contentious, especially when it came to politics or religion, but always remained important moments of real, deep contact between generations, a place where everyone felt part of something bigger. Workplace meetings. In a world without email, instant messaging, and video conferencing, most issues at work were handled in person, face-to-face, or over the phone. Meetings were held in specially equipped conference rooms, small meeting rooms, or simply at communal tables in the office where people from the same department or project gathered. All coordination, project discussions, brainstorming, decision-making, problem-solving, all of this went through live meetings, phone calls, often on the company's internal PBX, which required dialing short numbers, and paper memoranda, memos, that were typed, copied on a risograph with a distinctive alcohol smell, or photocopier and distributed around the office. Discussions were lively, participatory, where you could see your colleagues' reactions, read their body language, catch intonations, exchange ideas spontaneously, and get immediate feedback. The ability to express oneself clearly and convincingly verbally, negotiate, present ideas, and find compromises face-to-face was an essential professional skill that was practiced daily. Delegations of employees traveled from city to city, or even across the country or abroad, to meet face-to-face with partners, suppliers, or customers because face-to-face presence signified seriousness of intent, readiness for real dialogue, and built trust. Fax, telefax, was just beginning to appear in large companies as something advanced. And sending a document by fax was an event, and receiving a fax was even more so. Work communication required more time for traveling and live meetings, but it was more focused on presence, face-to-face interaction, and interpersonal relationships. Conversations in bars and cafes. Bars, cafes, diners, and coffee shops were the most important centers of urban and neighborhood social life, especially after working hours or on weekends. Here people met friends, colleagues, business associates, or simply spent time alone but surrounded by others, observing life. The atmosphere of these places promoted relaxed socializing, dimmed lights, music from the jukebox or radio, clinking glasses, clattering dishes. New acquaintances were made naturally, without the need to like or add to friends. It was enough just to talk to the person next to you, smile, or offer a treat. Cozy diners with their regular customers and familiar waitresses were places where community was felt, where strong friendships and even romantic relationships were born. The atmosphere of these places fostered openness, sincerity, and the lively, direct communication that was an integral part of everyday social life. They were third places between home and work, where people could be freer and socialize according to their own rules. Hobby clubs. Participation in various clubs, hobby groups, and communities of interest was a very important way to find like-minded people, expand your social circle, and build social ties outside of work and family. People united around common hobbies and interests. Book clubs, photography enthusiasts who could spend time together in a dark room processing film. Gardening clubs, chess clubs, stamp or coin collectors, foreign language study groups, amateur sports teams, bowling, softball, basketball, theater studios, astronomy clubs. Meetings were held regularly, once a week, once every 2 weeks, or once a month, in libraries, community centers, schools, evenings, or simply in someone's home, becoming an expected and important event of the week. Here you could not only share your hobbies, show your work, discuss the latest news in your field of interest, and learn new things, but also make friends who shared your passions and understood your passion. Communication in such clubs was focused, deep, based on shared values, knowledge, and interests that might not be understood by outsiders. It was through such communities based on shared passions that long-lasting friendships were formed, based on more than just a neighborhood or a job. Call-in radio shows. In the 1970s, radio was one of the main media of information, entertainment, and opinion. Radio shows with live call-in shows were very popular and represented a kind of early analog of interactive communication. Listeners were invited to call into the studio to express their opinion on the topic discussed on air: politics, social problems, local news. Ask a question to the host or guest. Congratulate someone on his or her birthday on air. Ask to play a favorite song or tell a personal story that was relevant to the topic of conversation. The voice of the interlocutor sounding on the radio from the speaker created a sense of personal communication, not only for the presenter, but also for thousands of other listeners. Many radio hosts, DJs, talk show hosts, became real stars of their city or region. Their voices were recognized on the streets and their opinions carried weight. It was a way for listeners to feel part of a larger conversation, to express their opinions in a public platform, even if it was just a local radio show, and to feel connected to other people who were listening to the same radio show at the same moment. Waiting on the line, the excitement of being connected to the studio and going on air, the very fact that your voice and your thoughts were being heard by thousands of people. All this made a call to the radio a special, exciting experience. Radio brought people together around common topics, music preferences, or local news, creating a virtual but tangible community of listeners. Walking in parks, meeting friends or family members in a park was an easy, affordable, enjoyable, and rewarding way to spend time together, enjoying nature and fresh air away from the hustle and bustle of the city. People picnicked on the grass or at tables, rode bicycles on the paths, played sports, played moving games, frisbee, softball, or just strolled at a leisurely pace sitting on benches and talking for hours. Nature, trees, flowers, birds, sunshine facilitated more relaxed and sincere conversations, a break from the daily hustle and bustle of city life and work problems. Children played on the playgrounds, swinging on swings, sliding down slides, running and making noise, while adults sat nearby on benches watching the children, exchanging news, sharing parenting experiences, and simply enjoying each other's company in the peaceful atmosphere. Parks became living centers of communication, where one could spend quality time without distractions, such as TV or phone, just being together in a pleasant environment. Each such walk, picnic, or game in the park strengthened the bonds between people, creating shared pleasant memories related to nature and recreation. Bulletin boards. There were public bulletin boards in grocery stores, libraries, community centers, schools, colleges, self-service laundromats, church entrances, and other high-traffic areas. These were usually large cork or wooden boards with a set of buttons or pins attached. Anyone could attach a handwritten notice on a piece of paper, typed on a typewriter, or even a small homemade poster. On these boards, one could find a variety of messages: invitations to local events, garage sales, school plays, concerts by local bands, charity fairs, requests for help, finding a lost pet, offering to help an elderly person, offers to sell anything, from an old car to knitted socks or homemade baked goods, job offers or employee searches, housing listings, roommate searches, or even personal announcements. Dating, looking for fellow travelers. People regularly looked at these boards as they passed by on their way to catch up on local news, find something they needed, or offer something of their own. Many a story of dating, bargaining, mutual aid, or starting a small business began with a short note on such a board. It was the real, physical, analog counterpart to today's social media and online bulletin boards, where information was disseminated locally within a specific neighborhood or city and required a person to be physically present to see and respond to it. Bulletin boards were important messengers of local news and a clearinghouse for information, and services within a particular community. Dance nights and discos. Music was one of the most powerful social forces bringing people together in the 70s, especially young people. Dance parties organized at schools, those often awkward but important gym dances. Local clubs, bars, or just at someone's house for a party, house parties, were important social events of the week or month, with music ranging from rock and roll and hard rock to funk, soul, rhythm and blues, and of course disco, which flourished at the end of the decade. People came together to dance, get to know each other, socialize, express themselves, and express emotions through movement and music. The atmosphere at discos was special. Bright, sometimes flashing or strobe lights, a rotating mirror ball that cast glare, loud rhythmic music, a packed dance floor, lots of people in bright, fashionable clothes. Dancing often became a way to get to know someone, to break the ice in communication, to express interest. At such evenings, friendships were born, romantic relationships began. Important conversations took place away from the noisy dance floor or in the fresh air near the entrance. Live communication under the music, experiencing the energy of the rhythm together. Physical closeness on the dance floor, exchanging glances and smiles. All this was an important part of youth culture and a way to build social ties in a relaxed, fun, emotionally rich environment. Newspapers with personal ads. In local and sometimes national newspapers, there was a special section called personal ads or dating that was quite popular with people of all ages and statuses looking for companionship, friendship, or romantic relationships. People looking for companions, life companions, or even colleagues in their interests posted short ads describing themselves. Gender, age, status, single white male, divorced female seeking, their interests, what they were looking for in a partner or friend, and left a P.O. box address in the post office for replies. For example, SWM 30s likes music, books, hiking, seeking SDF for companionship. Write to Box 123. Responding to such an announcement required time, effort, and patience. One had to write a letter, pack it carefully, mail it to the specified P.O. box, and wait, hoping that the addressee would receive it and respond. Often, correspondence began with a few cautious, rather formal letters in which people gradually opened up, sharing their thoughts and experiences. And only over time, if there was mutual sympathy and trust, could they exchange phone numbers or arrange a meeting. Newspapers served as a kind of analog platform for dating and slow, thoughtful communication, based on words written on paper. This was the beginning of many real-life stories of friendship, love, and family building that developed gradually without instant likes, swipes, or quick photo evaluations. It was a process that required investment and patience, but it was an opportunity to get to know a person through their thoughts and words. Scout camps and camps, Cub and Teen Scout camps, e.g. Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and especially summer camps were places where real, lasting friendships were formed, often lasting a lifetime because people spent intense time together, sharing common experiences and overcoming challenges. Away from their parents and familiar home environment, in a new, often unfamiliar environment, children and young people lived in groups, squads, or cabins, with several people in one room or tent. The camp schedule was tight, getting up to the sound of the horn or the loud voice of the camp counselor. Toot, 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 toot. Hey campers, time to get up. Morning exercises, breakfast in the common dining hall. Scheduled activities, swimming in the lake or pool, sports games, arts and crafts, archery, orienteering, survival classes, preparation for evening activities. In the afternoon, there was a rest period when you could read, write a letter home. The camp was one of the main suppliers of subjects for letters and postcards, or just have a heart-to-heart talk with your cabin neighbors. Evenings were full of events, dinner in the dining hall, then camp-wide activities, talent shows, contests, outdoor games, and often culminated in bonfire parties. Sitting on logs or on the ground around a burning fire, children and counselors sang songs to guitar, told scary stories, shared impressions about the past day, or just looked at the stars. This created a special atmosphere of trust, mutual support, camaraderie, and closeness that could not arise in a normal school environment. Communication here was very intensive, natural, and eventful. Children and teenagers learned to find a common language with different people, to resolve conflicts without parental intervention, to support each other in difficult moments, for example, a bout of homesickness, and to rejoice in common successes by sharing their innermost secrets before bed in the semi-darkness of the cabin, by going through challenges together, e.g., a thunderstorm on a camping trip or losing an important match. They formed deep, trusting bonds that often stood the test of time and distance after camp ended. Counselors, often college students, became not just supervisors, but older companions, mentors, and role models with whom special relationships were also built. The camps taught not only practical survival skills or sports games, but also the essential art of living in a community, finding a common language with different people, and building strong friendships based on shared experience, support, and mutual understanding. It was a real young fighter course on socialization and personality formation, which left vivid memories, smells of pine forests, sounds of guitar around the campfire, and contacts of friends with whom you could later correspond or call. Conversations at bus stops and on trains. While waiting for a bus on a street corner or a train on a station platform, people often started spontaneous conversations. These places, where time slowed down while waiting for transportation, became micro-social sites of sorts. Strangers, united by a common weight and perhaps a common route, might discuss the weather. Looks like rain. The latest news from the newspaper someone was reading, newspaper rustling, politics, sports, or simply exchange impressions of their day. These were short, fleeting conversations, small talk, that helped pass the time, made the wait less boring and lonely, and created a sense of community, even with complete strangers. At bus stops, especially if they were the same people waiting for the bus at the same time each day, e.g. on their way to and from work, more stable acquaintances could be formed. People recognized each other by sight, said hello, exchanged a few phrases while sharing news or complaining about transport delays. Sometimes such a chance encounter on the road developed into a longer conversation if people were traveling companions for a long journey on a train or intercity bus. Then it was possible to talk more frankly, telling about one's life, work, family. After all, the person was a casual travel companion whom, most likely, you would never see again, which created a certain freedom. The ability to strike up a conversation with a stranger was a common skill, not surprising or suspicious as it might be today. The road, public transportation, and the places where they waited became spaces for communication themselves, where human connections could be born out of a casual glance, an exchange of phrases, or simply waiting together. These were fleeting, but sometimes memorable encounters, a reminder that the world is full of people and everyone carries a story. Church services and activities. For many Americans in the 1970s, church was not only a place of prayer and spiritual growth, but also a vital center of social life and a pillar of community. The congregation gathered not only for Sunday services, but also for the many other activities that were organized at the church during the week. Sunday school for children, youth group meetings, adult Bible study groups, women's or men's clubs, benevolence committees, choirs, and crafts groups. There were regular joint meals, the famous potluck dinners or suppers when everyone brought their own dish to the communal table, tea parties after services, charity bazaars, feasts and celebrations. The parishioners supported each other in difficult moments of life, in illness, loss of a loved one, financial problems. The congregation collected funds, organized help around the house, brought food and visited. At joyful moments, weddings, christenings, birthdays, the whole community shared in the happiness. Very strong, cohesive social ties were formed around church communities, based not only on common interests, but also on shared values, faith, and mutual support. It was a place where different generations, from babies to old people, socialized, knew each other by name, and cared for each other. Backyard friendship parties, hot summer evenings, especially in the suburbs and the private sector, often turned into small, informal celebrations centered on the backyard. Families gathered together, neighbors, friends, relatives, to spend time outdoors, relax, and socialize in a relaxed atmosphere. There were barbecues on the grill, where men often took on the role of grill master. On folding tables or picnic tables, food was set out. Salads, chips, snacks, homemade baked goods, and drinks in large pitchers of ice. They played lawn games, badminton, croquet, frisbee, ring toss. Children ran around and made noise, and adults sat on the patio, veranda, or just on the grass in deck chairs or folding chairs. Talking, joking, laughing, sharing news, discussing everyday activities. These were often potluck or bring-your-own-meat parties, where everyone brought something to share, adding variety and reducing the burden on the hosts. Music played from a portable radio or tape recorder to provide a backdrop for socializing. The atmosphere was very relaxed, informal, and friendly. It was a simple and enjoyable way to foster friendship and good neighborly relations during the warm season. The sounds of laughter, quiet music, the smell of roasted meat, the chirping of cicadas at dusk, the soft light of lanterns or garlands on the trees, all this created a special, warm, cozy atmosphere that connected people and created unforgettable memories of summer evenings. Children played together, adults socialized. It was a time of real, lively contact between families and friends, based on closeness, trust, and shared enjoyment of simple things in each other's company. Life in the 1970s flowed at a different pace than it does today. It was slower from a technological point of view. Information and communication took time and effort, but perhaps that's why communication was deeper, more meaningful, and emotionally intense. Every meeting, every handwritten letter, every phone call, every spontaneous peek at a neighbor's house, every conversation at the bus stop carried the warmth of real presence, effort, expectation, and anticipation. We looked for each other not in lists of online contacts, not in the news feeds of social networks, but on the streets, at kitchen tables, in buzzing phone booths, on the dance floor, in hobby clubs, in parks and church parishes. Connections were built gradually, brick by brick, through shared experiences, conversations, help, and participation in each other's lives. And perhaps that is why the connections that were made in that era seem so strong, durable, and meaningful. Today, technology has changed the world, making it incredibly fast, information instantly accessible, and communication global and superficial. We can connect with hundreds of people at the same time, yet feel alone. Memories of the 1970s, of this analog world of communication, remind us of something important. Real human intimacy and deep connection are born not in the speed of a reply to a message, not in the number of likes under a photo, but in the sincerity of attention, in the willingness to spend time, in shared experiences, in physical presence, and in genuine interest in the other person. It was a world gone, but its lessons about the value of real, deep communication remain relevant today. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos, in which we will continue our fascinating journey down the memory lane and reminisce about other iconic elements of 70s life. It was an unforgettable time, and it's nice to revisit it again and again, if only in our memories.